All right, so we are live. Thanks a lot, Daniel, for hosting me with the Creative Product Managers. My name is Dan Olsen. I'm going to look forward to giving you guys a webinar here on how to achieve product market fit and share some advice from my book, The Lean Product Playbook. What we're going to do, since it's a webinar, is if you have any questions as we're going along, just type them in the chat window. And I actually can't see the chat window while we're talking. So what I'll do is at the end, I'll go back and see what questions people have chatted, and I will answer them then. Okay, so let me go ahead and switch this over and share my screen. 1 second. Okay. We'll give people another minute here. I see people are still coming in here. Yeah, people are coming in 1 or 2 minutes late. So let me share my screen. Share my PowerPoint with you guys. Great. Yeah, so like I said, my name's Dan Olsen. I'm the author of Lean Product Playbook, and I'm going to spend about 50 minutes or so sharing advice with you from that book on how to achieve product market fit. And then, as I said, we'll do questions and answers at the end. If you think of a question as I'm giving my talk, just please type it in the chat box. I won't be able to answer them at the moment because I can't see the chat box, but at the end, I'll go look at it and answer all the questions. So let's see, we're at 2:03, so why don't we go ahead and jump in. Just to share a little bit about my background so you know where I'm coming from. I started out with a technical background, engineering, and after working in engineering for a little bit, I realized I wanted to get an MBA, so I moved out to Silicon Valley and earned an MBA from Stanford Business School. And then early in my product management career, I realized how important user experience design is, and so I went out of my way to take classes in that. And I've also managed to stay relatively current on coding since I've been coding for a while now. My first job out of college actually was doing submarine design. And it was just very technical. At the end of the day, it was pretty much product management. It was just very, very technical. And when I went to business school, that's when I learned about this career called product management. And I realized that's exactly what I want to do. It sounded really exciting. And I asked everybody, where's the best place to go to learn about product management? And everybody said Intuit. So after business school, I got a job as a product manager at Intuit and worked my way up to be a product leader at Intuit. And then after Intuit, I basically worked at startups as leading products. I stumbled into actually being a product management consultant. I worked with Box back then. And then I finally had an idea for my own startup that I did, which was called Your Version. It was a personalized news startup. We launched at TechCrunch. We won the People's Choice Award. I did that for several years. And after that, I went back to being a product management consultant, which is what I do now. And I help startups and big companies basically build great products and build strong product teams. And some of my other clients are Facebook, Microsoft, and Medallia. I also am very passionate about sharing best practices in product management. So about 3.5 years ago, I started a monthly speaker group out here in Silicon Valley called Lean Product and Lean UX. And we bring in the top speakers every month to share advice in product management and UX. My Twitter handle is @DanOlsen. And I post my slides on my website, dan-olsen.com. if you want to see some of my other talks or look at my slides. So, and the name of my talk is How to Achieve Product Market Fit. And product market fit is been made up. That term has been made much more popular by Lean Startup movement that Eric Ries started. It was actually coined by Mark Andreessen back in 2007, but it became much more popular with Lean Startup. And in my mind, I think there's, if you think of product management and Lean Startup, there's a lot of overlap in the concepts and the approaches. This is kind of how I think about it. Because if you think about whose job is it in a company to achieve product market fit, it's a product manager's job, basically. So I'm really excited that the Lean Startup movement has given us all these terms like MVP and pivot and getting people to be explicit about their hypotheses. So that's one of my books called The Lean Product Playbook. It's pretty much a product management book, but it shares Lean Startup concepts as well. And I've been giving this talk, a version of this talk, since for 10 years now, actually. It's hard to believe. And it used to be called How to Be a Lean Product Ninja. That's why I've got this Lego Ninja figure here. And when I was giving the talk back then, lean startup hadn't become as mainstream and popular as it is now. And so I used to ask people, hey, what is lean startup all about? These days, most people have heard about it. But if I had to summarize what is lean startup all about, like what are the high level bullet points, it would be these. It's about getting explicit about your hypotheses, right? Instead of making assumptions as you're building a product, stopping and saying, okay, this is what I'm assuming, this is my hypothesis, and writing it down. And then moving on and figuring out, great, what's the fastest, easiest way for me to test those hypotheses? It's also about keeping your scope small. This is where the concept of minimum viable product, or MVP, comes in, right? In the old days, you'd have a team of engineers go off for 18 months and work on something and come out and launch it, and then realize nobody wanted what they just built. So what we want to do is keep the scope small until we have more confidence that we're heading in the right direction. We definitely want to get out of the building and talk with customers, right, to test our hypotheses, with the goal of learning and iterating, hopefully very quickly, and with the ultimate goal of achieving product market fit. So when I give this talk live, I usually see a lot of heads nodding, and it's like, hey, that sounds pretty easy to do, right? So people at this high level bullet points, they kind of nod their head and they say, yeah, I know all that. But what I've found is, though, even people may know at the high level what's going on and what Lean Startup is about, when they go to actually apply the principles at their company or on their team, they run into challenges and obstacles. And the closest analogy I can think of that I've come up with is, like, it's basically like when January 1st comes around and you decide, you know what, this year I'm going to get in better shape. I'm going to start working out and exercising. So you join a gym and you buy your workout clothes and you show up at the gym and you're like this guy. You basically aren't really sure what to do. It's like, I don't always go to the gym, but when I do, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's not because, like, you don't know. You know that you need to work out and you're motivated to go to the gym. You just don't know the details of how to use the equipment, how many, what exercises to do and how many to do. Or maybe you're like this guy and his friend, just making it up as they go along, winging it. That actually looks pretty dangerous. I don't recommend you try that. Or maybe, you feel like this guy who's just feeling overwhelmed. So that's basically why I wrote my book, The Lean Product Playbook. It's 335 pages. I wrote it to be very comprehensive. And it basically is a 6-step process, how to achieve product market fit, that I'm going to be sharing with you today, along with examples. And, I invite you, for those of you that are on Twitter, I invite you to tweet about any slides you see that you like or anything you learn. My handle, again, is @DanOlsen, and you can throw some hashtags on there like product management or lean startup or UX if you want, so that other people see it. And I think Daniel has an offer in the webinar software on the right-hand side. It's a link to my book if you want to learn more about it. It's got a 5-star rating on Amazon, and you can read the comments that other people that have read it have left there. So basically, my book and this talk is a goal of, basically a process for how to achieve product market fit. And again, I mentioned it was coined a while ago and became more popular with Lean Startup. The interesting thing is, if you actually go out and read articles about it, people talk about it like, oh, yeah, this company succeeded because they have product market fit. This other company didn't succeed because they didn't have product market fit. So they talk about it like this true or false state of existence. You either have it or you don't. And there aren't many articles out there that actually give you more guidance and tell you how to achieve it. And what I found is, after working on so many products with so many product teams, I started to see a pattern and kind of a high level set of conditions that needed to exist if you wanted to achieve product market fit. And so in writing the book, I actually created a framework for product market fit called the product market fit pyramid that I want to walk you through, because it's the foundation for the concepts in my book. The market, it's a pyramid, obviously. It's got 5 layers. The bottom 2 layers of the pyramid are the market. And it all starts with the target customer at the bottom of the pyramid. That's the bottom layer. Whose life are we trying to make better? Who are we trying to create value for? And this is a hierarchical model, so each layer builds on the layers beneath it. And the next level up is, what are their underserved needs? What are the underserved needs of that particular target customer? We want to be focusing on solving customer needs. The ones we want to focus on are the ones that are underserved. And I'll talk about that a little more. If people are happy and everything is going well and how they're getting a certain need met, we don't want to focus there. We want to go on the ones where there's an opportunity to really create a lot of value. And those two together are basically the market. And if you look in a marketing textbook or an economics textbook, it'll tell you that a market is a set of people that share a common need. So that's market. Now your product I like to represent as 3 layers at the top of the pyramid, starting at the bottom with value proposition. And value proposition ideally is connected to the needs layer if everything is going well. And it's basically addresses the question, okay, which customer needs is our product going to provide, and how are we going to do so in a way that's better than the other alternatives, right? That's your value proposition. The next layer up is feature set. This is what functionality do we need to build to deliver those customer benefits and solve those needs. This is where the concept of MVP comes in. We don't want to overbuild before we confirm that we're going in the right direction. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have user experience, right? This is how your customers and users interact with the functionality to actually get the benefits. And when you think about it this way, product market fit is just, hey, all the assumptions and work that we're doing on our product in the top 3 layers, how well do they resonate with the market that's out there, which is the bottom 2 layers? So that's product market fit. And once I created this process, it's basically a way to categorize all the key assumptions that you're making as you're developing your product that need to hold true in order to achieve product market fit. And once I had this framework, I realized I can create a process out of this, a way to work through your key hypotheses. And basically, it's called the lean product process. You start at the bottom by articulating your hypotheses about your target customer. Then you identify what are their underserved needs. Then you specify what your value prop is going to be. Which needs are you going to meet, and how are you going to be better or different? Then you focus on what your feature set is going to be, focused on determining what your MVP should be, coming up with the user experience design, and ideally a prototype. I'm a big believer in actually testing before you actually build or code things. And then there's a 6th step, which is once we have a user experience, whether it's a live product or a prototype, then we can close the loop, and we can step 6 is go and talk to our customers and show them that UX prototype and see where we're at with product market fit. So that's basically the lean product process. I'm going to walk you through some of the key parts of it today and share an example of it in action as well. And this is meant to be an iterative process. Obviously, our initial hypotheses aren't going to be 100% correct. So as we work our way through the pyramid, we're going to be iterating. And you may have heard of the build, measure, learn loop from Lean Startup. That's a great concept to get people to thinking about the iterative nature. But I actually prefer a slightly modified version that I created that starts with hypothesize, because I think everything should start with your hypotheses. From there, you design a way to test your hypotheses. You test them, you learn from that test, and then you revise your hypotheses and you go on to the next iteration. So it's meant to be iterative, as I said. And the first step of the process, jumping into it, is determining your target customer. And I should say that this process applies, obviously, if you're building a new product, it applies. If you're building a new feature for an existing product, you can use it. If you're building like a V2 of a product or feature, it works. And if you're trying to just improve an existing product where you haven't applied these techniques, you can use it in all of those cases. But what I like to acknowledge is if you're building a new product, like a version 1 product, and you're starting with, hey, determine your target customer, I just want to acknowledge that this is probably the point of the greatest uncertainty. You may not have a good idea who your target customer is right now yet, and that's fine. It's okay to have a tentative hypothesis, because as we move on the process, especially in step 2, step 1 and 2 are very closely related. We're going to go back and revise our hypothesis about our customer. But I want to show you why it's so important to get really clear on who are we really targeting. Let's talk about a customer need that a lot of people have, say transportation within 100 miles of your home, right? We all need to get to work, to school, to the store, to run our errands, whatever it is, right? That's a need that a lot of us have. But the second we look through that common need through the lens of a specific customer, we'll see that the detailed needs and the preferences can be quite different. So let's talk about 2 different people that have that need. On the one hand, say they're soccer moms, moms who drive their kids to soccer on the weekends, and on the other hand, speed demons, guys that like to go fast. And you can imagine, what if we went out and interviewed 20 soccer moms and asked them, hey, do you have this need for transportation? Yes. Great. Can you tell us what matters to you? What's important to you for that need? And we might find things with the soccer mom group of like, well, I'm carrying all my kids and their friends and all their soccer gear, so the car's got to be big enough to hold all that. Secondly, I'm driving my children around. They're very important to me, so safety is very important. I want to make sure that they're safe as I'm driving around. And finally, I'm doing a lot of driving on the weekends. I'm driving all around, so, fuel economy is on my mind. I want to make sure I'm not spending too much on gas. Those might be some of the top things that we hear. Even though they share that high level need, these are the specific things that they care about. If we interviewed 20 speed demons, they wouldn't care about any of those things, right? The things that they might care about are, hey, how fast does the car go? I care about it going really fast. I want the car to look cool, and I want the car to make me look cool when I'm driving it. And again, you can see that even though they both share the high level need, when you drill down and peel the onion and get more specific through the lens of a specific customer, the details are quite different. And so the markets are quite different. And as a result, the products, the optimal products that have product market fit, end up being quite different. On the one hand, a minivan for the soccer moms. On the other hand, a sports car. And I like thinking about the car market as an example. If you just think of all the different types of cars that are out there on the road, they've done a good job of really understanding, okay, who's this for and what's important to them, and then creating a unique product for that segment. Once we've gotten clear on our target customer, and by the way, personas are a good way, as I mentioned in my book, a good way to capture your hypotheses about your target customer. They're typically used later in the process when you're designing, but I think they can be used very early just to kind of capture your key hypotheses. And then we want to move on to, great, for this target customer, what are their underserved customer needs? Like, we want to talk about what are their customer needs, but within that, which ones are underserved with an opportunity to better serve them. And when we're talking about customer needs, I find it really helpful to apply a framework that I created called problem space versus solution space. And I've been talking about this concept for a while, and I'm excited to hear more and more people talking about problem space. But let me explain the difference basically. So on the left-hand side, we'll have problem space. Problem space is a customer problem or a customer need or customer benefit that the product that you're trying to build should address, right? It's a well-written product requirement, a well-written user story. You can think of all those in the problem space, right? In contrast, solution space is when we actually create a specific implementation of a product or feature to address the need. So if we go and build a product, we're in solution space. If we go and create a design, we're in solution space. If we're just talking about what the product should do for a customer, then we're in problem space. Say, for example, I said, hey, I think it'd be great to give customers a way to easily share photos with their friends. That statement, easily share photos with your friends, is in the problem space. The second, maybe one of my friends says, that's a great idea. I went and coded this app, this iOS app. That app would be in the solution space. Or if I sketched out some mock-ups of what that app could look like, that would be in the solution space. And what happens a lot of the times is just human tendency is to kind of start out and just jump right into the solution space, especially for teams that maybe are more engineering centric. That can happen, where they can just start coding. It's really easy for them to code, so they just start coding. Or design centric teams where it's really easy for them to just start designing. But the goal is you want to, before you rush into solution space, make sure you're clear on the problem. Because what you want to do is carefully map your solution back to your problem and make sure it's addressing the right problem. So the example that I like to share here is when NASA was sending astronauts into space, they knew that the ballpoint pens that we use here on Earth wouldn't work up in space because the pens rely on gravity for the ink to come out, and there's no gravity up in space. So they knew there was a problem, that they weren't going to work up there. Now, it wasn't NASA. NASA didn't actually do this, but one of their contractors, Fisher, the head of the Fisher company, said, you know what, I think we can invent a pen that'll write in space. And he spent $1 million of his own money in R&D, research and development, and he invented a space pen. There's a picture of it there. It writes in space. It doesn't need gravity. It's pretty cool. Faced with the same challenge, the Russians sent their astronauts into space with pencils. And you can actually get a Russian space pen. It's a joke. It's a pencil in a box. It's a red pencil in a box. Kind of poking fun at the fact that Fisher spent $1 million, whereas the pencils, the Russians just use a pencil. So, and by the way, if you go Google this, you'll end up on some urban myth page on Snopes. Typically, what people think is an urban legend is that NASA spent the money, but NASA didn't spend the money. It was a Fisher space company that did it. And in my book, I have the links to both NASA and Fisher pages that talk about the true story. So it's not an urban myth. But why do I raise this up for problem space, solution space? Well, obviously, first thing is, if the pencil was just as good as the pen in meeting the problems, then the one that didn't take $1 million of R&D and all that cost is the superior solution, right? It's higher ROI solution. That's the first reason I bring it up. The second reason I bring it up is, even when you're trying to focus on the problem space, the solution space can can still kind of sneak in there, and it can be, you can basically like pollute your problem space requirements with solution space. So when Fisher said, hey, I think I can invent a pen that writes in space, and if he was saying that was his requirement or the customer problem he was going to solve, if you think about what that statement has, it actually has some solution space pollution in it. And there's a particular word in there that is that solution space. And when I give this live, people recognize that it's pen. I think I can develop a pen that writes in space. Well, a pen is a solution. It would be better to say, hey, I think I can come up with a way to write in space. Just be vague like that and not mention a specific solution. That would be better and better at staying on the problem space side of things. Even better, you could use the 5 whys technique from Lean Startup and from the Toyota way. It's like, hey, well, why do we need a way to write in space? Well, you might ask astronauts, it eventually would come out that, well, we need a way to take notes and refer to them later. That would be an even better way to articulate the problem space for this, right? And that opens up the third thing about this is when you think about the problem space, if we articulate it that way, maybe we would come up with some crazy Siri talking thing where you talk to it, and it plays your notes back to you or something like an Alexa or something like that. So by getting clear on the problem space and not polluting it with solution space, you can open up the solution space to other creative ideas that you may not have thought of, right? So those are some of the reasons why I like this example for problem space versus solution space. At the end of the day, the pen has one advantage over the pencil, which is that it doesn't actually catch on fire. And so at the end of the day, that requirement is really important. So people use space pens, even the Russians use space pens now. But again, I think it's a good example to highlight problem space versus solution space. Let's talk about more of a software product. So again, we have problem space on the left and solution space on the right. And the idea is to map between the two. So I used to work at Intuit. And one of our big products is TurboTax. Here in the United States, we have to file our taxes every year. And it can be kind of complicated. And TurboTax is a leading product that helps people do and file their taxes, basically. And it's a software product, so it's in the solution space. It competes with another product in the solution space called TaxCut. And the idea is you want to map over to problem space. So if we had to say, hey, what is it that TurboTax does? What's the high-level benefit that it does for people? And if I interviewed 10 people, they may not all say the same thing, but the common answer would be something, well, it helps me prepare my taxes. It helps me do my taxes. Now, the other thing that's important about problem space, solution space, that I learned it into it actually from Scott Cook, the founder. What he loved to do is when he had a group of product managers, he'd say, hey, who's the biggest competitor to TurboTax? And everyone would raise their hand, and he'd call on somebody, and they'd be like, it's TaxCut. And he'd say, no, you're wrong. It's pen and paper. Because at the time, more Americans were doing their taxes with pen and paper. So that's the other thing about getting clear on problem space is it helps you really understand what are the real alternatives and substitutes as far as how customers are getting this need met. Now, what you want to do, prepare my taxes, that's pretty high level. So it's good to get clear on what the high level overall benefit is. But again, you want to peel the onion and get more detailed. And this is the fun part with your team. When you're building a new product or building a new feature, this is where you want to apply divergent thinking and brainstorm. What are all the different ways we can help people, possibly help people in doing their taxes and preparing their taxes? So we might come up with very specific ideas like, hey, it can help you check your taxes. Computers are really good at math, so it can make sure there's no math mistakes. It can help you file your taxes, right? Instead of having to print out your returns and go stand in line at the post office, you can push a button and file them online. It can help you maximize your deductions, right? It can ask you a bunch of questions about the things that you did this year and try to identify ways for you to reduce your tax bill. Maybe it can analyze your return and say, oh, these things look kind of risky from an audit standpoint. You might want to reevaluate these, right? And that's the idea, is you want to brainstorm all the things that you could do for your target customer to deliver that benefit. And you'll notice that when a good problem space statement is written a certain way, these all follow a certain template. They all start with an action word, a verb, right? Prepare, check, file, maximize, reduce, because it's actually doing something for the customer, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's written from the customer's point of view, not the company's point of view or the developer's point of view or the product manager's point of view. It's check my taxes, file my taxes, maximize my deductions, reduce my audit risk. So that general template of verb written from, verb phrase written from the standpoint of a customer is generally a good template for problem space. And again, you want to peel the onion and come up with as many of those detailed benefits as you can. You might end up with like, a dozen or 2 dozen of those or even more. If you follow my advice, you're going to end up basically, when you do that, you'll find that one thing that you'll find is that some of the benefits, they seem kind of related or similar, right? And so if we, for example, help take these benefits, help me prepare taxes, reduce my audit risk, check my return, and then we ask people, again, the 5 whys. Why is that valuable? Why is it valuable to you that TurboTax checks your return? Why is it valuable to you that it helps you prepare your taxes? What we'd be doing is getting them to kind of go to a higher level about why it's important and creates value. And we might find for these 3 features that at the end of the day, after we ask why enough times, it comes down to something related. The benefit is really about being more confident in how they do the taxes or empowering them to do the taxes. And the way this might play out is, well, you know, when I used to try to do my taxes by myself, I'm just not really good at math, and I don't know the tax laws that well. So as I'm filling out my tax forms, I'm really anxious and nervous. I feel overwhelmed, like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm probably making a mistake, and I'm probably going to have a fine or get in trouble because I'm not doing them right. But with TurboTax, it just asks me questions, and it holds my hand and walks me through it, and I feel a lot more confident and empowered when I do my taxes. That might be the narrative that we hear. There could be, and we call these benefit ladders because you're getting the customer to climb up higher and higher to a higher level benefit, but these are all related on the same confidence ladder. There could be a completely different ladder related to saving time, right? The things there might be save time preparing taxes, save time filing taxes, right? And the idea there is if you took a stopwatch the old way and you took a stopwatch the new way, you could quantify the time savings. So save time would be a completely different benefit ladder from confidence. And a third ladder could be saving money, which is different too. You know, by helping you maximize your tax deductions. Why is that important? Well, I end up with more money in my pocket. It saves me money. And you'll notice this whole time I've been talking about TurboTax, I haven't mentioned any features. I'm staying in the problem space and creating this robust definition of detailed features and then these ladders, detailed benefits with these benefit ladders or clusters, right? The problem space can be kind of messy, but there is this kind of structure organization of related benefits. But we can talk about features and jump to the solution space. It turns out TurboTax has a feature that delivers on each one of these benefits. For that one, it has a tax interview wizard, audit risk analyzer, tax return error checker, and so on. And that's what you want to do is make sure that when you build a solution or a feature that it clearly maps directly to a customer problem, right? And the side benefit is if you have clear mapping of solutions or features to problems, and you have a well-named feature, then just by the customer seeing the name of the feature, they can figure out how it's going to create value for them. Now, and that's what you basically want to do is create this robust problem space definition before you go to the solution space. And if you follow my advice, you know, you might end up with dozens of needs, customer needs in the problem space. So then the next question that comes up is like, great, we've done our divergent thinking. We've come up with dozens of needs. What do we do now? We can't possibly address all these needs. So what you want to do is prioritize those needs that you could address to figure out which ones are the ones that really offer the biggest value, potential value to create for customers. And the framework that I found most successful here is importance versus satisfaction. So let me explain that real quick. We have the importance of the user need on the vertical axis going from low to high. So you can imagine asking someone, say, a survey question of, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to you to be able to file your taxes online, right? And they would give you an answer. How important is it for you that it helps you maximize your tax deductions, right? And different people are going to give different answers, right? And you can average them, but that's the idea if you think about it like a survey. On the horizontal axis is satisfaction with the current alternative. So here it'd be like, hey, thinking of how you do your taxes today, how satisfied are you with how much it helps you maximize your tax deductions? And so the importance of the user need has to do with the problem space, and the user satisfaction has to do with the solution space. And again, you can imagine each of these as like a survey where you ask people to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, or you could also think of it just as a thinking tool for you and your team. Hey, let's just talk about low, medium, high. Do we think this user need is low, medium, or high importance? Do we think the satisfaction that people have with current products is low, medium, or high? So let's divide it into 4 quadrants so we can talk about these. In the bottom left quadrant, we have low importance of user need, and we have low user satisfaction. In the bottom right, we have low importance of user need and high satisfaction with current alternatives. At the end of the day, neither of these 2 quadrants are worth going after because it's fundamentally going after a low importance need, right? Why would you go after that with your precious time and resources? It'd be better to go after a high important need. And people do end up launching products here. it's usually not on purpose. They obviously didn't set out to build something that's not important, but by not following kind of customer-centric techniques and testing their hypotheses, that's how they end up doing that. In the upper right quadrant, we have high importance of user needs, so that's better. But we also have high satisfaction with current alternatives. So people are pretty happy with what's out there, even though it's in a high importance need. This is the definition of a competitive market, right? There's already products up here that are doing a pretty good job. The first thing that I think of when I think of this quadrant is like Google Internet search. It's not like people walking around saying, man, that Google search, I just can't find anything. It's just not working for me. It works pretty well. You type in something, and you may have to iterate your search a little bit, but you're probably going to find what you're looking for. So that's, again, the competitive market. The upper left quadrant, that's where we have high importance of user need and low satisfaction with current alternatives. So it's an important need, and people are not satisfied with how it's getting met today. This is where opportunities are, right? This is basically where the big opportunities are and where we want to try to focus our attention. I'm not saying you can't go after a competitive market. You can, but there's an expression of, hey, you need to be 10x better than the competition. That's definitely where that applies, right? You can't just come out with another Google search, another search engine and expect to displace Google, right? If it's 5 or 10% better. You need to be 10x better, and you got to get clear on how you're going to be 10x better to take on that quadrant. But in the upper left quadrant, again, there's big opportunities there. One of the examples I like to share up there is Uber. Now, Uber's done a lot of things right from a product standpoint and marketing standpoint to get to where they are as far as being a successful business and getting such wide adoption. They've done a great job on their product and on recruiting drivers and on acquiring users. But I think an unspoken reason why they've been so successful is that they fundamentally addressed an upper left quadrant need. You can imagine if I asked 20 people, hey, how important is it to get to your flight on time? How important is it to get to your job interview on time? How important is it to get to your date on time? It'd be pretty important to get to where you need to be on time. And you can imagine, before Uber, people mainly took taxis. You can imagine if we asked 20 people, hey, tell us about, think about your last 5 taxi cab rides that you rode on. And, not all of them would be bad, but you could easily imagine getting low satisfaction scores. If we ask things like, hey, how did the person, how satisfied were you with how prompt they were as far as arriving on time? How safe did you feel when you were riding in the car? How clean was the car? How polite was the driver? How easy was it to pay the person at the end of the ride? You can imagine, getting some low answers, so people with low satisfaction. So again, that's an upper left quadrant need. And what I like about this, my importance versus satisfaction framework, it's meant to be a visual framework. And what I'm trying to say is, like, you can plot a product or feature, like this red point here. We're saying, hey, this product represented by this red dot, it addresses a need with that level of importance, with that level of satisfaction. I'm trying to basically show that this is a visual framework and that the area made by that rectangle is a measure of how much value that feature creates or product creates for customers. And if there's another feature that addresses a higher importance need with a higher level of satisfaction, then it creates that much more area, that much more customer value. And when you see it this way, basically, you see that the area to the right of where you are today, of where people are with existing products, that's the opportunity to create customer value. And that's why the upper left quadrant is where the big opportunities lie, because it's where there's the most area to the right of where the market is today. And if you have an existing product, then obviously your goal should be to try to increase satisfaction of how it's meeting those needs to create customer value. And if this seems a little conceptual or abstract, this idea of importance versus satisfaction, let me show you some real-world data. So I was working on a product that had 13 key features. And what we did is we surveyed, thousands of users. We had a large sample size and asked them to rate the importance and satisfaction for each of those 13 key features. So here's the real data. You can see we've got importance on the left. Now we've actually got a numerical scale going up to 100. On satisfaction, again, we've got a numerical scale going up to 100. And each of the 13 points you see here is one of those key features plotted where the answers came out on importance and satisfaction. And the number next to each point is the satisfaction, just so you can see it more easily. So the first thing that I noticed was this feature up here in the upper right, 100% importance, 98% satisfaction. My first reaction was, that's awesome. The team did a great job. We're clearly satisfying people on something that's very important to them. My second thought was, well, we probably shouldn't work on that feature because it's pretty good and there's better opportunities to improve, higher ROI opportunities somewhere else. And where is that somewhere else? You look through the other dots, there's a cloud in the middle there of a bunch of dots. There's one in the bottom left, but there's this one here that is the farthest that's up and to the left. And it's basically a pretty important feature that we're not doing that well on satisfaction. And so we use that importance versus satisfaction framework to prioritize this the highest because it represented the best opportunity to create more customer value. And if you like this idea of getting quantitative about creating customer value with importance and satisfaction, then I recommend checking out the book, What Customers Want by Tony Olwick. I found this book, so I invented this framework when I was at Intuit, and a couple years later I discovered his book and was excited to see that he had his own kind of framework that was similar to mine. And he also recently came out with his second book, Jobs to Be Done. He was one of the pioneers of Jobs to Be Done, which kind of uses these techniques. All right, so once we kind of figure out what are those underserved needs that have the biggest opportunity, the next thing we want to do is get clear on our value proposition. Which of these are we actually going to bite off? Which customer benefits are we going to address? And how are we going to be the best? We don't want to have a Me Too product. We want to figure out how we're going to best meet those needs better than anything that's out there. And the model that I like to use for this is the Kano model. So I actually studied lean manufacturing before I came out to Silicon Valley. And that's where I first learned about the Kano model. So it comes from the quality movement. But it's also a way to think about customer needs and satisfaction levels. And let me walk you through it real quick. So on the horizontal axis, it's basically trying to show how fully does the product meet the needs, or the feature or product meet the needs. All the way on the left from, hey, it doesn't meet the need at all, to it fully meets the needs on the right. And then on the vertical axis, it's talking about, hey, as a result of how much the product meets the need, how much customer satisfaction does it create? All the way at the bottom from, hey, they're very unhappy, they're very unsatisfied, all the way to the top where they're very satisfied. And if this seems a little complicated, don't worry. The cool thing about the Kano model is it breaks all benefits and features down into one of three categories. The first category is a performance benefit or feature, and this is pretty straightforward. The more the product meets this need, the more customer satisfaction is created. The less the product meets the need, the less customer satisfaction is created. And basically, more is better, less is worse. If we were building microprocessors, the one that had the higher chip speed or clock speed would be better, right? If we go back to the car example, say we were shopping for a car and we saw two cars that were very similar, and we said, oh, these look pretty similar. But then all of a sudden we realized that car A had twice the fuel efficiency, right? Twice the miles per gallon than the other car. All other things being equal, we picked that car because fuel economy is a performance benefit for cars. So that's the first and most easiest to understand is performance. The second set of benefit or features are must-haves. Now, having a must-have, if you look at the right over here, it doesn't actually make anybody happy. It just flattens out. But if you don't have it on the left, not having a must-have makes them very dissatisfied, right? So these are, again, the must-haves. You can think of them like table stakes or checkmark features, checkbox features, right? If we stick with cars, say I was shopping for a car and I went to a showroom and I saw this car that looked amazing. I really loved the way it looked. And I looked at the spec sheet on the window and I loved the specs. But then I looked inside and it didn't have any seatbelts. I wouldn't buy it because seatbelts are a must-have because I'd be afraid of getting hurt or dying if I went and drove it, right? But if car A has 5 seatbelts and car B has 100 seatbelts, you don't say car B is 20 times better, right? Once you have 1 seatbelt per passenger, you're good to go. And that's when it flattens out. So that's the must-have. And then the third category is delighters or wow features, basically. And here, not having a delighter on the left, it doesn't actually cause a problem because people aren't expecting it to be there. But if you have a delighter, you can see that as it meets that need, it creates a lot of positive customer value and satisfaction. Not today, but when the first cars came out with GPS navigation, it was a delighter, right? Before that, people were getting lost, or if you recall, people were printing out, their MapQuest or Google Maps on a piece of paper and bringing it with them or asking for directions. And then the first cars that had GPS built in, the people would just basically type in the address and it would fundamentally change how they got from point A to point B. They never got lost. But as we know, over time, more and more cars got GPS navigation. TomTom and Garmin came out with their add-on devices. And now we all just use our phones to do GPS navigation. And that illustrates another important concept, which is this is not a static picture. It's dynamic, right? With things changing over time. And so yesterday's delighters can become today's performance features, can become tomorrow's must-haves. And the pace with which that happens depends on the level of innovation and competition in your space. But what we want to do is use these three categories to specify our value proposition, which again is, okay, out of all the benefits that we've talked about, which ones are we actually going to provide in our product, and how are we going to do so in a way that's better than the competition? And so what we want to do is put the Kano model to use and create a simple table where we list one per row each of the benefits for our product category. So you would list out the must-haves, one per row, the performance benefits, one per row, and the delighters, one per row, right? And I've kept it generic here so you can imagine what it might be for your particular product category. So that's step one. Step two, you want to create a column for each of your key competitors and a column for your product. And, again, I don't recommend having like 7 competitor columns, maybe 2 to 5 would be good, your top competitors. And then what you want to do is score your competitors on each of these benefits, right? So in this case, I've scored competitor A and B. They both have the must-have benefits. Competitor A is high in how they do on performance benefit 1. Competitor B is high in how they do in performance benefit 2. They're both so-so in performance benefit 3. And competitor A has a delighter, basically, right? And this is the essence of product strategy right here. This is the backdrop upon which we should be figuring out how is our product better or different. Too many product teams end up launching undifferentiated Me Too products because they don't do this exercise. I would say like less than 10% of product teams probably do a product strategy exercise like this. But using this backdrop, now we want to pick our battles, right? It's really easy to say, oh, we're going to be high in every single one, but that's not being strategic. One of my favorite definitions of strategy is it means saying no to something. Because if you just say yes to everything, then you're not being strategic. And in some of my other talks, I mentioned a Steve Jobs quote where he says, for every yes, there's 1,000 no's. But this is the backdrop, and so we might come up with our value prop like this. If we go down our column, we're going to have the must-have benefit, of course. We're going to be medium at performance benefit 1. We're not going to try to outperform competitor A. Performance benefit 2, we're not going to worry about as much. We're going to be low there. And what we're going to focus on is being the best at performance benefit 3. Maybe we have identified a target market segment that really values performance benefit 3. Maybe we have some solution ideas on how we can better deliver higher levels of satisfaction. But that's where we plan to be the best. And then we have our own idea for our own delighter, basically. At the end of the day, what matters the most in our column is the performance benefits where we plan to be the best and our unique delighters. And those are what are called your unique differentiators. And we want to make sure we're really clear on this. This is our product strategy. 1, so that we have a differentiated product, but 2, so that as we go into the next step, which is determining our MVP should have, should convey these unique differentiators. If we go and build an MVP that only has the must-haves and the features where we're not planning to be the best, then what are we really testing with our MVP? We want to be testing our value proposition, our unique differentiators in our MVP. And so the next step is to specify your MVP feature set. I don't have tons of time to go into this. MVP is probably one of the more contentious concepts or words out there. Some people love that term. Other people hate that term. It's usually because of misinterpretations or how it's being used or how they've seen it being used or misused in the past. And I see teams making a couple of mistakes with MVPs. The first is the whole point of an MVP is to not overbuild before you've confirmed you're heading in the right direction. Right? To not be the old school waterfall kind of, hey, go and build a big thing and then launch it and then realize nobody wants what you just built, is to figure out what's that smallest thing that we can build and test before we invest a lot. Even though it's meant to help avoid scope risk, I still see teams over-scoping their MVP. Again, it's really easy to say, oh, it needs that other feature, and keep growing the scope. The second mistake I see people make with an MVP, and this is part of why it gets a bad name in certain organizations, I like to explain by using this other framework. So this is another pyramid from Aaron Walter's book, Designing for Emotion. It's a really good book. I recommend checking it out. He used to be the head of design for MailChimp. And his pyramid basically talks about, how can we think about a product? We can think about it and assess it as far as how functional is it, how reliable is it, how usable is it, and how delightful is it? And, I would say, 10 to 15 years ago, there was an increased focus on usability and making sure that not only were products functional, but that they were usable, that people could use them. And in the last 5 years, you're hearing a lot more about delight. So usability answers the question, can people use it? Delight answers the question, do they want to use it? How do they feel when they use it? And the whole point of his book is to elevate the discussion to that level. But the idea is we can take this pyramid, and what we can do for any product is color in how much of the pyramid the product actually has managed to accomplish or achieve, right? And so if we're starting with a new product or feature, it's obviously we're starting with a blank slate here, and we know that we can't fill the whole pyramid up in our V1 product or with our MVP. So we have to fill out a subset. So people usually know that. But what I see, the second most common mistake is people use MVP as an excuse to do this. So they only build a subset of functionality, which is good because that's the intent of an MVP. You don't want to build everything. But they use MVP as an excuse to not have it be reliable, or usable or delightful. It's like, oh, it's just an MVP. We're just going to work on the functionality and then test it. Not surprisingly, those don't test well. Those kind of MVPs don't test well, and then people go, oh, people don't like what we're building, and the project gets scrapped. It's true that you want to build a subset of the pyramid, but you want to build a subset that looks more like this. So you're building a subset of functionality, as in the previous case. And look, it's going to be an MVP. It's not going to be perfect. I'm not trying to have my cake and eat it too. But for the subset of functionality that you bite off, it needs to be reliable enough and usable enough and delightful enough, right? So that when you test it, you're getting a true measure of where are we with product market fit. So that's my other advice on MVP. And in the book, I have a lot more advice on how to break features down and determine which ones are in your MVP and come up with the roadmap over time. The next step is you want to create an MVP prototype. Once you get clear on your feature set, this is where UX design comes in. I like to think of UX design as an iceberg. Just like an iceberg, it's misleading because there's only a small portion that's visible above the water. That portion is basically visual design. We're all visual creatures. We take in most of our information through our eyes, the colors and shapes that we see, basically. But when you use a product that has product market fit and that you like, it's because the team has done a good job at these more foundational levels of conceptual design, information architecture, interaction design. And I unfortunately don't have time to go into all those, but in some of my other talks, I do go into them more. But what you want to do is basically work your way through from having your MVP idea, which is usually words, words in a Google Doc or on a Confluence page. How do we go from those words to actually having a user experience design? And there's a range of artifacts, design deliverables you can create. I like to categorize them based on interactivity on the vertical axis here, like compared to the final product, how much can you click and tap on it and interact with it? And then on the horizontal axis, fidelity, compared to the final product, how closely does it resemble it as far as like pixel perfect or not? And in the bottom left, low interactivity, low fidelity, we have the awesome hand sketch, right? Whether it's on paper or on a whiteboard, it's a starting point to kind of get your initial ideas together. And what I like to share here is a workflow of how you work your way up to higher fidelity, higher interactivity as you work through the design. And hand sketches are fine for you to work through on your team. You want to iterate, on the whiteboard or on paper, get to the point where your team's happy with that. Then you want to take it to wireframes. So wireframes are higher fidelity than hand sketches. And in the old days, people would make static wireframes. These days, it's so easy to make clickable or tappable wireframes that's pretty much the bar these days. So if you're not creating kind of clickable, tappable wireframes, I would recommend you check out the latest tools. Balsamic's one of those tools that makes it really easy. There are other tools as well. And with clickable wireframes, you want to iterate till your team's happy. Those are actually good enough to test with customers to get some feedback on, hey, does this flow make sense? Are we missing any key features? Do you understand what's going on here? That's definitely, you can get some good value. And you want to rinse and repeat until you solve those major issues. And then you can proceed to clickable mockups. So mockups are higher fidelity than wireframes. Now we are worried more about the colors. Wireframes will often be black and white or grayscale. We're not trying to worry about what color it should be yet. Once we get to mockups, then we want to focus more on the visual design, the fonts, the images, the colors. And here I mentioned InVision as a tool. So the cool thing about InVision is you can take the output from any design tool, upload it, and create this clickable, tappable prototype that people can go through and you can test with users. So that's a really good point of testing there at that level of fidelity and interactivity. And again, there are other tools that you can do. And if I recommend talking to customers in waves of 5 to 8 and pattern matching and figuring out what the top issues are and addressing them, and then going out and testing with another wave. Once you get to the point where there are no real issues that you're seeing in those tests and people are giving you positive feedback, then you can pretty confidently proceed to building your live product. And then when you do have your live product, I would still recommend that you go out and test it, because there are things with live products that come up that don't come up with mock-ups, as far as browser compatibility and performance issues and things like that. So that's kind of the workflow that I recommend, to go from your ideas about your MVP features to actually a UX design and a live product. And just to make it crystal clear of what a wireframe, the difference between a wireframe and a mockup, because I see sometimes people use those terms interchangeably. This is a wireframe. You can see it's low fidelity, it's grayscale. We're not worried about the color. We're not worried about the fonts or the pictures. That's a wireframe. And then here's a mockup for the exact same app. And you can see the difference between high fidelity mockup and low fidelity wireframe. Now we have picked the colors, we have picked the images, we've picked the font. Basically, that's the difference. And again, in my book, UX design is so important. I have a whole chapter just on UX design, and also a whole chapter on this next topic, which is testing your MVP with customers. So this is the point now. We've worked our way through the first 5 steps, right? We've got clear on our target customer. What are their underserved needs? What's our value prop with the Kano model? What's our MVP feature set? And now we have a clickable or tappable prototype with the UX design. And now it's time to close the loop, step 6, with our target customers. I don't have time to get into that in this talk, but in other talks and in my book, I've talked about that. What I want to close out with quickly is a case study of applying this end to end. So I was working on a product called marketingreport.com. There was a CEO of a startup. They had an existing product. He had an idea for a new product. It was a small team, me, the CEO, VP of marketing, and a designer. And he wanted to see if there was a business opportunity here for this new idea. And he didn't have that many development resources, so he himself said, hey, we have to do this without any coding resources at all. So I said, great, we'll use prototypes and we'll see where we're at with product market fit. And the idea was a marketing report that would let customers control the direct mail. So direct mail is a nice way of saying junk mail. We all get junk mail. And the idea is like, why do you get the junk mail that you do, and is there something you can do about it? So I may come home from work one day and there might be a coupon for cat litter. Why did I get a coupon for cat litter in the mail? Well, it's because in some marketing database somewhere in the cloud, it thinks that I have a cat, right? So that's the idea. Maybe I don't have a cat, or maybe I do, I don't know, right? And there are a lot of parallels to the credit industry. If you think about the credit industry, not today, but years ago, you would apply for a loan or a credit card, and there would be some database off in the cloud associated with your social security number, and it would figure out your credit worthiness and come back with a yes or no answer, and you would have no idea why, right? But over time, the credit report and credit scores became public, and it gave customers transparency into what was going on with their credit and why the decisions were getting made. That was the idea here, is like giving people transparency into why am I getting the junk mail that I'm getting and what can I do about it, basically. So that was the idea. So I said, great, the first thing we're going to do is map out our benefits. Let's figure out the problem space and what our top solution space ideas are. So the core idea was basically this top box here. Learn why I received the junk mail I received. That was the core idea. And the top features in the solution space were a marketing report, which was like a credit report, a marketing profile, which would show all the information that they had on me in the cloud, and then a marketing score, which was like a numerical measure, kind of like a credit score. So that was the core idea. And then one of the executives, in addition to that, wanted to test money-saving offers. Like maybe I could say, hey, you know what? I don't have a cat, but I actually have a dog. I'd be happy to opt in and have you send me like dog food coupons so I could save money. So that was like opting in for relevant money-saving offers. There was a hypothesis that maybe people wanted to compare their spending habits and amounts to other people. And then kind of because social networking was hot at the time, we just kind of put in social networking kind of without getting clear on the problem. It was basically a solution-based idea. And then the other executive didn't really care about those 3 blue items. He cared about the green core idea. And in addition, he wanted to explore, hey, what if we just help people reduce their junk mail? Just like reduce the overall volume of mail that they get that's not relevant. And then we brainstorm a secondary benefit of, hey, maybe we can say that we're helping to save trees because we're saving all this paper by blocking this junk mail. So I iterated to get us to this point. I said, okay, is everyone's ideas here on the board? And they said yes. And I looked at this and I said, this is way too big for one MVP or one product concept. So what I recommended is that we break it into 2. So again, the green was the core idea. So I took the green core idea plus the yellow reduced junk mail and created one MVP concept, which we called Marketing Shield, because it was shielding you from junk mail. And then what I did is I took the core green idea, because again, that was core, and combined it with the blue ideas that helped you save money. and we called that the marketing saver concept, or MVP, basically. And so we actually created 2 sets of clickable prototypes. Obviously, the green functionality was identical between the 2, but there was slightly different functionality for the yellow or blue. Then we proceeded to the next step of creating, UX designs. Here's an example of the homepage or landing page that we created. I'd call it medium fidelity. There's a little bit of color here, but we didn't spend a lot of time obsessing about the visual design. Then once you clicked in, this was one of the main pages. Again, medium fidelity. And the way it worked is we had one of these blocks for each of those key features, and we just kind of mixed and matched the blocks for each of the 2 product concepts, so that the saver concept had the saver blocks and the shield concept had the shield blocks. And the idea was each of these blocks had a learn more button that when you clicked on it, went to a full page all about that feature. So it was like a prototype of about 8 or 9 pages for each of the MVP concepts. We recruited customers. I moderated them through the prototypes, and what did we learn? Here's that same diagram now color-coded with red, yellow, green. And what do the colors mean? Nothing was a slam dunk. There were a lot of questions and concerns when we tested both of these concepts from customers. Green meant that even though there were questions or concerns, we felt like we could address them, and that there was some potential for some product market fit there if we could address the questions and iterate. That's what green meant. Yellow meant there was low interest. And red meant there was basically they didn't like it, or they were confused by it. They just didn't want anything to do with the red things. So the first thing is, did we get any green? So luckily we got some green. You can see we have money saving offers in the saver concept and reduce junk mail and save trees in the shield concept. So there's no guarantee when you do this, especially the first time, that you're going to get any green. The second thing, though, is, was there any green in the core area in the middle? Learn why I received the junk mail I received. There wasn't any green there. So we're lucky that we tested something else in addition to that core idea. And this happens all the time. Companies start out with one idea, they get out there, start talking to customers, and the customers go, well, that's not actually that important to me, but let me tell you about this other thing, right? The third thing is we found some red. That marketing score in particular, I didn't get into it too much, but that was something that we knew was going to take a lot of resources, right? We needed to have a bunch of engineers to build the algorithm. We didn't have any data for that. We would have had to purchase a third-party data feed that would have been expensive. It would take a lot of time and effort to create that, and then a lot of time and effort and resources to actually educate customers on what a marketing score meant. Because it was, people really didn't like it at all, we can avoid that low ROI feature, basically. And so, you hear people say you have to pivot. Well, we started in the middle in the yellow, and now we had to decide, are we going to pivot to the left to reduce junk mail, or are we going to pivot to the right to money-saving offers? And we decided to pivot to reduce junk mail for a few reasons. One is the company had an existing product and brand, and reducing junk mail was more consistent with that brand. The second thing is money-saving offers. There were already a lot of companies doing that, and we had a hard time on the value proposition figuring out how are we going to be better or different. And thirdly, money-saving offers, that would require a lot of partnerships with other companies and biz dev deals that would have taken a lot of time and pushed off our time to market. So for those reasons, we pivoted to reduce junk mail. Because we had done 0 coding, it was super easy, and we didn't have any emotional baggage about just throwing away all the mock-ups and prototypes that we had created and just starting from scratch. And what we did is we started from scratch, and we took all the feedback that we got on reduced junk mail and save trees and the shield concept, and I went through 6 pages of notes and made sure every little comment or question that a customer had, we addressed in the new prototypes. And so we completely pivoted away from marketingreport.com to junk mail freeze. Here's the new landing page that we tried out the second round with people. And, I mentioned the problem space and peeling the onion. The way we talked about it before was, hey, we're just going to help people reduce junk mail. Well, when we talk to people, we realize not all junk mail is created equal. There are certain types of junk mail that people really, really hate and really bother them. And you can see them called out here in the bottom right. It's the financial mail, like cash advance checks, new credit card offers, pre-approved credit card offers. Why is that? Well, we learned a lot of people that live in houses, their mailboxes aren't locked. And the mailman, mail carrier leaves the mail there. And anybody can come in and grab those cash advance checks or pre-approved credit card offers. They're worried about people messing up their credit rating and doing identity theft. So once we learned that, we put that front and center. And then the second time around when we tested, we saw people looking at that and nodding because it resonated with them, basically, right? And we elevated the idea of, hey, we help stop identity theft at the top. The other thing is I learned other things about the problem space I didn't even know. several of the people in that group said, you know what? I'm like, tell me what you do when you check your mail. Well, let me tell you, Dan, 6 days a week, which is how often the mail comes in the States, I go to my mailbox and then I go straight to my paper shredder and I spend 5 minutes shredding all the irrelevant mail that I don't care about. So that's 5 minutes a day, 6 days a week, 30 minutes a week. There's 50 weeks in a year. That's 1,500 minutes a year wasted. And so there's a whole separate save time benefit that we didn't even know about before we talked to people. So we added this spend less time shredding mail here. Other things, like we said, hey, we're going to save trees. Well, several people asked us, well, can you tell me how many trees you're going to save? So we put right here, save 43 trees to get specific. And so, the second time around, we tested with a new batch of customers. It went a lot better. There were still some questions and concerns, but there were a lot fewer, and the magnitude was a lot smaller than the first time around. And I didn't mention it the first time, but both times we asked, hey, would you pay $10 a month for this service? And the first time around, no one had any interest in paying $10. They basically told us, no way. And the second time around, what they said was, well, I need a 30-day trial. But if in that 30-day trial, your product did what it says it is going to do on these pages, then I would gladly pay you $10 a month. So I was really excited about that. And then the other proof that we had, evidence that we had, was in the second batch, after the test was done, almost every single person, at the end of the test, was like, thank you so much for your time. Here's your check for your compensation for your time. Almost every single person, after we gave them the check, asked me, so is this product live now? Can I go use it at the website? And I was like, oh, sorry, no, we're still working on it. It's not built yet. Then they were like, well, can you please contact me when it's live? I want to use this. Can I give you my phone number and my email? Can you please ping me? So that was like additional validation that was outside of the user test, that we had achieved a fair amount of product market fit. So I was pretty excited about that. And again, we didn't really do anything that was crazy or rocket science. We just followed the process that I've shared with you today. And to sum up, that process is basically, start out by getting clear on who your target customer is. Figure out what their underserved customer needs are by using that importance versus satisfaction framework. Use the Kano model to get clear on your must-haves, performance benefits, and delighters, and really get clear on how you're going to be better than the competition. Again, we don't want to overbuild too much before we realize we're going in the right direction, and so we want to get clear on our MVP feature sets. We want to use UX design to build the prototypes so that we can go out and test with customers with the goal of learning and iterating and going through that loop that I mentioned, hypothesize, design, test, learn, with the goal of improving product market fit. Here's again, I post all my stuff at danolsen.com, dan-olsen.com. There's my Twitter handle. And with that, I'm going to switch over and look at the chat box, and I'd be happy to answer questions for a little bit that people have been hopefully typing in. So let me go over there and see what we got. All right, we got some good questions. Thanks. Let me look at them real quick. Let me share this up here while we're doing this. Okay, cool. All right. Great. All right, let's see what we got. Could you some clickable wireframes mockups you develop in Balsamiq or Envision app? I think they're asking, could I share or show? So yeah, it's kind of hard to show the clickable ones, but and a lot of times my clients, they don't, it's okay to share a screenshot or something, but the actual prototypes have been gone. But if you go to Balsamiq or Envision app, they have plenty of examples of other ones that are there. Even if you Google it, a lot of people do post them online. So I would recommend, those are tools that I really recommend. All right, Federico asks, once you have interviewed your market segment, qualitative, and you have your problem list, you want to test at scale with a survey to understand the importance. Do you only select early adopters, people with the big pain? That's a good question, and I didn't talk about that. So in the book, I talk about, hopefully a lot of you are familiar with Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. He has this chasm model that has to do with technology lifecycle adoption, like technology adoption lifecycle. And there are people that are early adopters who are very eager, and they want that customer benefit so badly, and they have such a pain point that they're willing to embrace new technology that may not be perfect to try to get that. And then there are other people that are more conservative or laggards, and they wait until everybody else is using it, and then they finally jump on the bandwagon. So that crossing the chasm segmentation may play into your personas of your target market, and often in the beginning it is kind of early adopters. But it isn't necessarily the case. You just have to figure out how important is that to your target market definition. And back to the question about the survey, again, I shared an example where I had a big customer base and I surveyed them on importance of satisfaction so I could show you numbers. But it's also very valuable even when you don't have a survey and you're just using it as a thinking tool on your team so that you guys among your team can decide, okay, we have 10 customer benefits. Do we think this one is high, medium, or low? And work your way through on your hypotheses. And then also, when you go and talk to customers, you can try to get a sense of high, medium, low from them, right, to validate your assumptions on importance and satisfaction. So even if you're not doing a survey, it can be a very useful framework for your team, and even when you do a small number of qualitative interviews. So could you give more examples about Kano model? Is it possible to use some company or example? Let's see. Well, I use the cars with the GPS navigation, the seat belts, and the fuel economy. That'll be another example. In the book, I talk about FlipCam. FlipCam was an older product, so before everyone started doing videos on their phone, there was several years where FlipCam came out and was like the dominant product out there. And I think we could probably work up a Kano model value prop for them, which had to do with kind of portability, ease of use. I think that at the end of the day, back then, getting your video files off whatever video camera you had and onto your computer was a major pain. And so I think their delighter that set them apart was how easy it was to get the files from the FlipCam to your computer. I was talking about it with another product person. They had a little USB plug that would flip out, and you could just plug it right into your computer. And then the file format was easy too. So that's another example. In the book, I also talk about in the early days of Google, of search engines, there was a lot of debate about what matters the most. Does the size of your index matter the most? Like how many pages your crawler is indexing? Those are the kind of debates that people had in the early days. Does the relevance matter more? And does the kind of design of your search results page matter more? And so at the end of the day, what mattered the most to people was relevance. And that's why Google, with their PageRank algorithm, was able to beat all the other people. And along those lines, I also, in the book, there was a startup called Cool in like the mid-2000s, 2007 or 8 or so, that tried to take on Google. I mentioned how Google Internet Search for me is in the upper right quadrant, right? It's a competitive marketplace. And they said, we're going to beat Google. And luckily for me, in their press releases, they said what their value prop was going to be. They basically said, hey, we're going to beat Google by having a larger index and by having better looking search result pages and things like that. And so you can see what their stated value prop was. At the end of the day, none of that really mattered. They had some performance issues as well. But besides that, what matters most to people is relevance. So that's another example of the Kano model. And there are a couple other good articles out there on it that you can check out. So cool. The published date for my book is 2015. Is there a more recent edition, Chris? No, that's the most recent one. It's 2 years ago. It came out. I think it's pretty timeless, the process that I talked about. So there's not one. It's only been 2 years, so I haven't started thinking about doing any second edition or anything. Playbook is available on the website. There's a link to the book. It's on Amazon. It's available on hardback, audiobook, and Kindle. On my website, I have a lot of my videos of my talks that are similar to this and other talks that are available to view for free, and a lot of SlideShare, PowerPoints, and things like that. So would it be possible to get a copy of the presentation by email? Yeah, I post it on dan-olsen.com. Here, I'll put the link here so people can get there. I'll put it in the chat. And I just use SlideShare, and it makes it, it's my speaking page. SlideShare makes it really easy to download all the PDF of that, basically. So let's see what else we got in questions. Do you have any suggestions how to approach customers for feedback in a way that's going to give you the most value? Yes, I didn't have time to get into that today, but I have a whole chapter on how to interview customers and conduct the feedback from customers. In some of my other talks that are longer, I get into it a little bit, and in my all-day workshops, I get into it a lot. But basically, it has to do with, I call it ramen user testing because you don't really need anything fancy. It gets into, a lot of it is how you ask the questions. At the beginning, you want to also spend a little time to build rapport with the person. A lot of times people are nice and they don't want to give you harsh feedback or criticize you. And so you need to like help mitigate that at the outset by saying, look, the whole reason we're talking to you is to figure out how to make our product better. Please don't worry about hurting our feelings. We want to hear, the truth. We want to hear what you think. If at the end of this session we don't have any ideas from you on how to make the product better, then that actually isn't helping us. So you're helping us by giving us ideas on how we can make this better for you. So that's one of the things. The other thing is not everybody is very talkative. It's kind of an awkward thing to do a customer interview, and be sitting there one-on-one with somebody and asking them to, you're looking at a product and people are asking you what you think about it. You've never seen this thing before. So there's a thing called the Think Aloud protocol, where you basically say, hey, look, at the beginning, it's all at the beginning. In addition to saying, hey, please don't worry about hurting my feelings, you say, hey, I know this is a little strange, but as you're going through the prototype, could you just please try to share the thoughts that are going through your mind? Could you just try to verbalize what's going through your mind as you click around and use the product, right? And so that's the way to make sure you try to get more feedback from people. And then again, the most important thing I think that I've seen make the difference between a good user test and a bad one is how you ask the questions. There are leading questions versus not leading questions. If in the middle of the test I go, that was easy to use, wasn't it? I've pretty much set the person up to have to agree with me and say yes, even if they don't think it was easy. You're kind of setting them up to say yes. That's the idea of a leading question. So you don't want to give, leading means you're giving the answer that you want in the question. You want to avoid doing that. The second thing is open versus close. If I say, was that easy to use? It's not leading. I didn't put yes or no in your mouth as an answer, but I've asked you a yes or no question. Was it easy to use? And you're going to have to, most likely, you're going to say yes or no. And sometimes junior PMs or junior designers, they really are excited. It's their baby and they want the user to say yes. Like their goal is for the user to say that the product is great and it's easy to use. And so they ask questions that way. That's not really valuable. Like, what do you get if at the end of the day, 6 out of 10 people say, yes, it was easy to use, and 4 say, no, it wasn't easy to use? Do you have any learning that you can take to make it better next time? You don't. So what you want to do instead of that, you can say, hey, could you please tell me what you think about how easy that was to use, right? And by asking, that's an open-ended question. If you say how or why questions, you're asking people, they have to give you longer answers. They have to stop and think about it, not just take the easy way out and say yes or no and quickly get the question over with. They have to think about what they're going to say, and you'll get more detailed answers that you can follow up on and hopefully get some learning that you can then use to improve the product next time. So those are some of my top tips on getting the most valuable feedback when you actually talk to customers and interview them. So what would your advice be to students who are at business school now and interested in tech product management? Yeah, so that was my path to product management. I would say, one, if they offer a product management class at your business school, not all of them do, definitely take it. If they don't, or even if they do, maybe sometimes there's like a joint class with the engineering school that focuses on product development. That might be interesting. At the end of the day, a lot of the entrepreneurship classes tend to be close to product management, where you're working on a new product or new business. Those are good. Some marketing classes can be good, learning about customer benefits. One of my favorite classes from business school was this game where we did this marketing simulation where you had to make all these decisions about your product, and there were other teams, and each team was a different company. So there can be, and you basically had to decide on your product, and had a lot to do with competitive analysis and positioning. So those are some ideas. The other thing I think is really big is just, if you can, partner up with the designer or partner up with the developer and kind of actually try to work on building some product or some prototypes, right? So getting pragmatic and practical as opposed to just theoretical. Definitely go to speakers, any speakers that are coming to campus related to product management or product development or entrepreneurship that are more product focused, that's good. If there are meetups around, like I run a big meetup here for product management in certain cities around the world. There are meetups that have speakers. And definitely check out the latest product management books. There's more and more books related to product management and design. There are good blogs out there on it. So those are all the things that I would recommend for people in business school to learn more about product management. So cool. I think that I answered most of the questions, and I see that we're 15 minutes over, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you very much for your time. I hope it was helpful. as I said, at dan-olsen.com, you can see some of my other talks. You can ping me via, with questions, or on Twitter at @DanOlsen. Definitely check out my book and other talks. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to connect with you afterwards or connect on LinkedIn. So thanks a lot. And as I said, hope it was helpful, and hope you guys all have a great day. Take care.